I wake up every morning at 5:30 without even looking at the clock. My old bones won't let me sleep longer, and I've been an early riser since my youth. My room in the annex, my son's former garage, is always filled with the pre-dawn mist through the small window that I leave ajar, despite the draft. I am 67, although on some days I feel like I am 80, especially when I hear Parker and Odelia whispering in the kitchen, thinking I can't hear them. My father is becoming more and more absent-minded. Yesterday I noticed that he forgot to turn off the stove. They talk about me as if I already have one foot in the grave. After getting out of bed, I do some simple exercises for my back, which has been bothering me since I worked as an accountant for Hillman Construction for 42 years. 42 years at a desk with a calculator and papers. Some might find it boring, but I always found satisfaction in numbers. They don't lie, unlike people. After my warm-up, I quietly make myself some tea. The electric kettle makes noise, but not loud enough to wake my son and his wife. They get up at 7 when their daughter Bridget gets ready for school. Bridget is my only granddaughter, a 16-year-old girl with eyes so similar to those of my late wife Miriam. Miriam, it's been 4 years since she left us. Pancreatic cancer, late diagnosis, quick and merciless death. After she left, our big house in the suburbs of Lexington became as empty as a discarded seashell. I wandered around the rooms for 2 months before Parker suggested I move in with them. "Sell the house, Dad," he said then, putting his hand on my shoulder. "We'll expand the addition and give you a separate entrance. You'll be better off with your family." At the time, his words sounded sincere. His wife, Odelia, even hugged me and whispered, "We'll take care of you, Cedric." I almost believed her. The house where Miriam and I had lived for 35 years sold for a good price. I kept a portion for myself and used most of it, almost 2/3, for the down payment on their new house in a prestigious neighborhood. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. My son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter, they deserved a good start. Parker had a good but not highly paid job as a building inspector, and Odelia was just starting to climb the career ladder as a logistics coordinator. "Don't worry about the paperwork, Dad," Parker said when I asked if we should do something about my share of the house. "We're family. This house will be your home for the rest of your life." I nod to my thoughts, sipping my tea and looking out the window at Lexington waking up. I've always been naive, according to Miriam, too trusting for this world. The clock reads 6:45. I put away my cup, put on a sweater, and go out to the garden to check on the plants before the family wakes up. The small vegetable garden is my outlet. I grow tomatoes, cucumbers, radishes, and greens. Bridget says my tomatoes are the best in the world. At 7:10, I hear noise coming from the house. Parker has turned on the coffee maker, Odelia is making breakfast, and Bridget is taking a shower. I deliberately linger in the garden, giving them time for a family breakfast. A month ago, Odelia remarked that I was hovering over them in the mornings. "Grandpa!" Bridget's clear voice cuts through the morning air, and I can't help but smile. She runs out into the garden, already dressed in her school uniform, her red hair casually tied back in a ponytail. "I did my math homework. Do you want to check it?" "Of course, dear," I reply, wiping the dirt off my hands on my old jeans. We sit down on a bench, and I look over her equations. Bridget has inherited my love of numbers, although Parker has always been more of a humanities person. "There's a mistake here," I point to the third equation. "Look closer." She frowns, then her face lights up with understanding. "Right, I put the wrong sign. Thanks, Grandpa." She hugs me, and for a moment, the world feels right. Then Odelia's voice calls from the house. "Bridget, the car will be here soon." My granddaughter sighs and rolls her eyes. "Bye, Grandpa." She quickly kisses me on the cheek and runs off. I get up from the bench, feeling a sharp pain in my knee. Old age doesn't come alone, as Miriam used to say. Entering the house through the back door, I find Parker finishing his coffee. He glances at me briefly. "Good morning, Dad," he says without much enthusiasm. "Odelia left you some oatmeal." I nod, noticing the bowl on the table. Cold oatmeal. 2 years ago, Odelia made me omelets and joked that I was as picky about food as her father. Now it's cold oatmeal. Progress. "Thanks, son. Are you working late today?" Parker shrugs, his eyes still on his phone. "As usual, lots of inspections, even more paperwork." He gets up, putting the cup in the dishwasher. I noticed that he didn't wash the pan after making himself scrambled eggs. Of course, I'll wash it. We'll be late today, he says, heading for the door. Bridget has rehearsal, then Odelia and I are going out for dinner. Don't wait up for us. The door closes before I have time to respond. I am left alone in the kitchen with cold oatmeal and an unwashed frying pan. A typical morning in the house I help buy. After breakfast, I go about my usual chores, cleaning the kitchen, doing laundry, dusting. Odelia never asked me to do this, but I know that if I don't, she'll sigh irritably in the evening, muttering something about men who can't keep the house tidy. At noon, I make myself a sandwich and sit down at my old laptop. I check my email, mostly newsletters and bill notifications. I still pay for part of the utilities, even though no one asked me to. It's my initiative, my attempt not to be a burden. The phone rings. It's Emmett, my old friend from college. He's the only one who calls me regularly. Cedric, old man, how are you? His voice is full of energy, as always. Emmett is also 67, but unlike me, he refuses to grow old. He runs a small investment fund, plays golf on the weekends, and recently married for the third time to a woman 15 years his junior. Same old, Emmett. So you're still putting up with those ungrateful kids? He doesn't hide his opinion of my situation. Listen, I'm going to the Old Maple tomorrow. Want to join me? It's been a while. The Old Maple is a small bar in downtown Lexington where we sometimes meet. I agree. I need to clear my head. After our conversation, I pull an old ledger out from under my mattress. No one knows it exists. Here I keep track of how much I've invested in Parker's house, how much I pay for utilities each month, and what other expenses I cover. And since last year, I've started writing down every dismissive remark, every cold look. It's silly to keep such a record of insults, but I can't stop. Today's entry: cold oatmeal, didn't say thank you for cleaning up, didn't invite me to dinner. I close the book and put it back in its hiding place. Why am I doing this? I don't know. Maybe it's a kind of therapy. Maybe it's proof to myself that I'm not going crazy, that my feelings are justified. In the evening, I'm sitting in my room rereading Dickens when I hear Bridget coming home. She knocks on my door, the only one who always does that. Grandpa, may I? She comes in with her backpack and plops down on the edge of my bed. How was rehearsal? I ask, putting down my book. Boring. She wrinkles her nose. Mr. Patterson criticized everyone again. He said I'm not emotional enough for Juliet. Juliet, huh? I smile. Want to read it together? I was pretty good in amateur theater when I was younger. Her eyes light up, and for the next hour we read Shakespeare, acting out scenes. Bridget laughs when I try to portray Romeo by dropping to one knee. My sore knee protests, but I endure. When Parker and Odelia return from dinner, we are still rehearsing. I hear their footsteps and voices. Bridget, Odelia calls. It's late. School tomorrow. My granddaughter sighs. I'm coming, Mom, she shouts, then adds in a whisper, Thanks, Grandpa. Juliet is better with you. She slips out, and a minute later Parker pokes his head in the door. Dad, we asked you not to keep Bridget up late. She needs her sleep. We were rehearsing her part for the school play, I explain. That's what teachers are for, he snaps. Good night. The door closes and I am left alone. I can hear the three of them talking and laughing in the house. Family. I used to be part of it. Before going to bed, I take out my book again and make another entry. Doesn't want me to help Bridget with her acting. Pushes his granddaughter away. Closing the book, I remember Miriam's last words. She was lying in her hospital bed, transparent as paper, holding my hand. Cedric, she whispered, don't let them take your dignity. Promise me. I promised, not fully understanding what she meant. Now I'm beginning to understand. As I lie in bed, I think about what Emmett would say if he knew the whole truth about how I'm being treated in the house I paid most of the money for. Sleep comes slowly, fitfully, and restlessly, like all my nights in this addition I call home. The Old Maple has hardly changed in the last 20 years. The same wood paneling on the walls, the same worn leather seats in the booths, the same smell of beer and old wood. I arrived before Emmett, took our usual booth in the corner, and ordered a ginger ale. I gave up alcohol 5 years ago because of my blood pressure medication. Cedric Hall, you look like a man who's about to go under, boomed a familiar voice. Emmett Pryor never entered a room. He always burst in, Tall, with a shock of gray hair, he wore a bright blue jacket that would have looked ridiculous on any other 67-year-old man, but not on him. "Good to see you, Emmett," I said, getting up to hug my old friend. "You're lying through your teeth," he laughed, sitting down across from me. "But I'm glad to see you anyway. Whiskey, Tom," he called to the bartender, who just nodded in response. Emmett was the only constant in my life since college. We met in our freshman year when we were both studying finance. I went into accounting, he went into investments, and he never missed an opportunity to point out that he had made the right choice. "How's your new wife?" I asked when Tom brought the whiskey. "Phoebe is wonderful." Emmett took a sip from his glass. "She's organizing a charity event next month. You should come, Cedric. Get out of your little house, have some fun." I shook my head. "You know I'm not good at these kinds of events. I know your son and his wife keep you on a short leash." His voice suddenly became serious. "How long is this going to last?" "It's my choice, Emmett," I sighed. "They're my family." "Family doesn't make you feel like a burden." He tapped his fingers on the table, as he always did when he was annoyed. "But that's not why I called you here." He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Remember that investment we made 6 years ago? The tech company Orion Security?" I nodded. Shortly before Miriam's death, Emmett had convinced me to invest some of my savings in a cybersecurity startup. The amount was small but significant, about $30,000. Miriam thought it was a whim, but she didn't object. "You deserve a little madness," she said at the time. "What about them?" I asked, sipping my ginger ale. Emmett smiled broadly, his eyes shining like a boy's. "They went public 3 months ago. The stock has skyrocketed. I waited to make sure it wasn't a temporary spike before telling you." He took a folded piece of paper from his jacket's inside pocket and placed it in front of me. "Here's the account statement." I slowly unfolded the paper, put on my glasses, and stared at the numbers. I blinked. I looked again. Is this a mistake?" "No mistake, old man." Emmett saluted me with his glass. "Your 30,000 has turned into 483,000. After taxes, that's about 350,000 net." My hands trembled, and I put the paper down on the table. "My God," I whispered. This is freedom, Cedric." Emmett covered my hand with his. "Freedom from your ungrateful son and his wife. Freedom to start a new life." I stared at the statement, unable to take my eyes off the numbers. 350,000. In Lexington, that money could buy a decent apartment, or even a small house. "Emmett, I don't know what to say." "Tell them you're finally moving out," he squeezed my hand. "I can't stand watching how they treat you anymore. Miriam would turn over in her grave." The mention of Miriam brought a lump to my throat. What would she say now? What advice would she give? "I need to think about it," I finally said. "Of course," Emmett nodded, "but not too long. Life is short, especially at our age." We spent the rest of the evening reminiscing about old times. College, our first jobs, how I met Miriam at a party Emmett threw. He talked about his travels with Phoebe, his plans for the future. "You know, we're thinking about getting a house in Spain," he said, ordering a third whiskey. "You should come with us next year. Mediterranean diet, Spanish beauties. You'll shake things up." I smiled, but my thoughts were far away. I imagined a life without daily humiliation, without Odelia's cold stares, without the disappointment in Parker's eyes. A life where I could see Bridget without feeling like an unwelcome guest. "I have to go," I said, glancing at my watch. It was almost 10. "I have to get up early tomorrow." "Why?" Emmett snorted. "You're retired. You can sleep until noon." "Habit," I shrugged. Emmett insisted that his driver take me home. The luxurious sedan pulled up softly in front of Parker's house at 11 o'clock in the evening. "Think about what I said." Emmett patted me on the shoulder. "You deserve better, Cedric, and now you can afford it." I nodded, thanked him for the evening, and got out of the car. The house was dark, with only a dim light on in the living room. I quietly opened the door with my key and was about to sneak into the annex when I heard voices coming from the living room. "Not the same as he used to be," Parker said. "Yesterday I noticed he forgot to turn off the water in the garden. We spent an extra $30 on the bill." "I told you," it was Odelia's voice, low and irritated. "We can't watch over him forever. We have our own lives." I froze in the hallway, holding onto the wall. They were talking about me, unaware that I had already returned. I looked on the internet, Odelia continued. Golden Years is an excellent nursing home not far from here. They have single rooms, 3 meals a day, and nurses on duty around the clock. He won't agree, Parker sighed. You know my father. He's in no position to refuse, Odelia's voice hardened. Where will he go? His pension would only be enough for a room in the slums, and we'll finally turn the extension into a home gym, just as we planned. I felt nausea rising in my throat. A gym. That's what I was to them. An obstacle to a gym. We need to talk to Dr. Lewis, Parker said. If he confirms that Dad needs constant care, we can put him there and not feel guilty. Honey, Odelia's voice softened. We're not doing anything wrong. Your father will be better off there. Professional care, interaction with his peers, and we'll be able to live our own lives. I slowly backed away toward the door, trying not to make any noise. I went outside and only then allowed myself to take a deep breath. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I walked around the house and entered the annex through a separate entrance, locked the door, and sat down on the bed. A nursing home. That was their plan. Get rid of me, free up space for a gym. But what about the money I invested in this house? What about Parker's promise that it would be my home for the rest of my days? I took my account book from under the mattress and opened the last page. They plan to send me to a nursing home, I wrote with a trembling hand. They want to turn my room into a gym. Then I flipped back to the first pages, where I had recorded all the money I had invested in the house. $240,000, the initial payment, plus monthly utility bills, roof repairs 2 years ago, a new air conditioner last summer. Everything was neatly recorded, all receipts saved and filed in a separate folder, which was kept in a safe deposit box at the bank. I had always been an accountant. Even when I trusted people, I kept records. Miriam would shake her head now and say, I told you, Cedric, you should have made it official. She was always more practical than me. I took out my phone and opened a message from Emmett that I had received before we met. If you decide to go ahead, I know a good lawyer. Price specializes in family law and real estate. First rate. Now, sitting in the silence of my room, which I had already mentally turned into a gym, I made my decision. In the morning, I waited until everyone left. Parker went to work, Odelia took Bridget to school and went to the office. Then I dialed the number from Emmett's message. Price and Partners Law Firm, how can I help you? A woman's voice answered. I need to consult with Mr. Price, I said, surprised at the firmness of my own voice. About joint ownership of real estate. I was referred by Emmett Pryor. One moment, please. A few seconds later, a deep male voice came on the line. Hugh Price speaking. Are you a friend of Emmett's? Yes, my name is Cedric Hall. I need advice on a delicate matter. Emmett warned me you might call, Price said. I can see you today at 2, if that's okay with you. I agreed and wrote down the address. Then I called Emmett. You got in touch with Price? Great, he exclaimed when I told him the news. Do you want me to come pick you up? No need, I replied. I'll take the bus. I need to be alone, to think. I understand, Emmett's voice softened, but know that I will support whatever decision you make. At 1:30, I was sitting in the reception area of Price and Partners, a law firm located in a glass business center in Lexington's business district. My checkbook and a folder with copies of checks, which I had picked up from the bank on the way, were in my briefcase on my lap. Mr. Hall, Mr. Price is ready to see you, the secretary said. I walked into a spacious office where Hugh Price, a stocky man in his 50s with a neat haircut and attentive eyes, was sitting at a massive desk. Mr. Hall, please, he said, pointing to a chair opposite him. Emmett speaks very highly of you. We've known each other for almost half a century, I said, sitting down with my briefcase on my lap. So, Price said, folding his hands on the table, tell me how I can help you. I took a deep breath and began my story about Miriam's death, about selling our house, about the money invested in our son's house, about promises that were not kept, and finally about the conversation I overheard. Price listened attentively, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. So, there are no official documents confirming your ownership of the house? No, I shook my head. Only checks and bank statements confirming that the money was transferred from the account where the proceeds from the sale of my wife's and my house were kept. I took out a folder with documents and an accounting book. It's all here, I said, placing them on the table. Every cent is accounted for. Price glanced through the documents, his eyebrows rising. An impressive sum, Mr. Hall, and very thorough documentation. I was an accountant for 42 years, I shrugged. It's a habit. A very useful habit in this case, Price smiled. Mr. Hall, at first glance, you have grounds for a claim for recognition of a share in the ownership of the property. It's called an implied trust, when one party invests significant funds in the other party's property with an implied agreement of shared ownership. He tapped his pen on the table as he thought. It's not a simple case, given the lack of a written contract, but your documentation plus witness testimony, for example, from your friend Emmett, if he was aware of the agreement, could create a strong case. What will happen to my son? To his family? I asked, suddenly feeling a heaviness in my chest. They may be forced to either buy out your share at market value or sell the house and divide the proceeds according to your contribution, Price said gently but directly. This could cause tension in family relationships. I smiled bitterly. Those relations are already stretched to the limit. They want to send me to a nursing home, Mr. Price, so they can turn my room into a gym. A room and a house bought with my money. Price nodded, his gaze becoming sympathetic. I understand. Mr. Hall, here's what I suggest. I'll study your documents in detail and prepare a preliminary legal opinion. Then we'll meet again, and I'll present you with all the possible courses of action and their potential consequences. The decision, of course, will be yours. How long will that take? Give me a week, he said. I want to be sure we've considered all aspects. I nodded, feeling both determination and fear. There would be no turning back if I went down this path. But did I have a choice? Allow them to send me to a nursing home? To take away the last shreds of my dignity? Don't let them take your dignity, Miriam's voice whispered in my memory. I agree, I said, shaking Price's hand. In a week. Leaving the office, I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. Something had changed. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life. I had money that no one knew about. I had a plan. And even though Parker and Odelia didn't know it yet, their lives were about to change as dramatically as they had planned to change mine. The week after my meeting with the lawyer dragged on painfully slowly. Every night I returned to the annex, which they had already mentally turned into a gym, and lay awake, running through different scenarios in my head. I continued to pretend that nothing had changed, cleaning the house, cooking dinner, which Parker and Odelia rarely appreciated, helping Bridget with her homework. Hugh Price called me on Wednesday when I was home alone. Mr. Hall, I've reviewed all the documents. His voice sounded confident. We have a good case, not perfect, but with a high chance of success. When would be a good time to meet for a detailed discussion? We agreed to meet next week. A plan was slowly but surely forming in my head, like minerals crystallizing underground, invisible to the eye, but with inevitable certainty. On Friday, Parker announced at breakfast that they were having a family dinner on Sunday evening. It's been a long time since we've all gotten together, he said without looking at me. Bridget needs more family traditions. I nodded, feeling a strange premonition. Parker didn't usually care about family traditions. Something was up, and I suspected I knew what it was. The conversation about the nursing home, a formal notice that I was being evicted from the annex. I'll make something special, I offered. No need, Odelia replied quickly. I'll order from Lorenzo's. Their lasagna is divine. The Italian restaurant Lorenzo's was Parker's favorite place. Odelia only ordered from there on special occasions, or when she wanted to soften Parker up before a difficult conversation. Yes, something was definitely brewing. On Sunday, I woke up with the first rays of the sun. I did my usual back exercises, drank tea, and checked the news on my tablet. At 10 o'clock, I got a message from Emmett. How's it going, old friend? Price said you've got a good case. Call me if you need help. I'm always on your side. I smiled as I reread the message. Emmett had always been there for me, from college until now. Even when Miriam and I were too busy to keep up with our friendship, he still called, visited, and invited us to dinners and celebrations. Such loyalty is rare. The day dragged on slowly. Bridget was at a friend's house. Odelia was preparing dinner, and Parker was tinkering with the car in the garage. I tried to stay away from home, wandering around the neighborhood, sitting in the park with a book, as if preparing for battle, gathering strength. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang, a delivery from Lorenzo's. I helped Odelia set the table, noticing that she had ordered my favorite salad with arugula and pear. It was a small gesture that might have touched me if I hadn't known about their plans. Bridget returned, beaming after a day with her friend. She hugged me, telling me about the new movie they had seen. "Grandpa, you would have loved it. There was this old detective, smart like you. He outsmarted everyone in the end." "Sounds interesting, sweetheart," I smiled, stroking her hair. By 7, everything was ready. We sat down at the table, Parker at the head, Odelia to his right, Bridget to his left, and me across from him. It was the perfect picture of a family dinner. Odelia even lit the candles. "So," Parker began after we had filled our plates, "Mom and I have some news. Here it is." I tensed up inside but continued eating, trying to look calm. "We've decided to make some changes to the house," he continued, exchanging glances with Odelia. "Oh, are we going to renovate?" Bridget asked enthusiastically. "Can I repaint my room?" "Not exactly, dear," Odelia smiled. "We're thinking about remodeling Grandpa's annex." I felt my stomach tighten. They were really going to say it at dinner, right in front of Bridget. "Where will Grandpa move to?" his granddaughter asked in confusion. Parker cleared his throat, adjusting his shirt collar. "You see, we think Grandpa would be better off in a special place. Their professionals will take care of him, and he'll be able to socialize with people his own age." "You want to send Grandpa to a nursing home?" Bridget sat up straight, her eyes widening in shock. "Golden Years isn't just a nursing home," Odelia quickly interjected. "It's a premium facility with personalized care, entertainment, excursions." "But Grandpa isn't old or sick," Bridget exclaimed. "He helps me with my homework. He's better at math than you are." "Bridget," Parker's tone became harsher. "This is an adult decision. Grandpa sometimes forgets things. It's hard for him to take care of himself." "That's not true," Bridget turned to me. "Grandpa, tell them." I slowly put down my fork and wiped my lips with a napkin. All eyes were on me. I felt anger building up inside me, anger that had been building up for years, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "Parker, Odelia, I appreciate your concern, but I am perfectly capable of living on my own." "Dad," Parker leaned forward, his voice condescending, as if he were talking to a child. "We've thought this through. Your pension will be enough to live in golden years if we add a little extra." "If you add a little extra," I repeated, feeling my voice tremble, "to my pension, which is barely enough for a room in a dormitory." "We want what's best for you," Odelia added with a fake smile. "Imagine, you won't have to cook or clean." "I like to cook and clean," I replied, "and I'm still strong enough to do it, despite what you say." Parker sighed and exchanged glances with Odelia. "Dad, be reasonable. We need more space. Bridget is growing up. She needs a room for her studies." "I don't need a room for my studies," Bridget protested. "I want Grandpa to stay." "Quiet," Parker scolded her. "Adults are talking." I looked at the son I had raised, whom I loved with all my heart, and saw a stranger before me. When did he become like this? When did my presence become an inconvenience that needed to be removed? "Parker," I began slowly, "this house was bought mainly with my money." Silence hung in the kitchen. Bridget shifted her gaze from me to my parents. Odelia froze with a fork in her hand. "What do you mean?" Parker asked, his voice tense. "I mean that the $240,000 I put down as a down payment was 70% of the cost of the house at the time of purchase." "It was your gift," Parker said slowly. "You said so yourself. I said I would help you buy a house. In return, I expected a place in the family, not eviction when I became inconvenient." Parker's face reddened. "We're offering you better terms than you deserve." His voice grew louder. "You forget to turn off the water, the stove. You're becoming a danger to yourself and to us." "Parker," Odelia said warningly, putting her hand on his shoulder. But he shook it off. "No, let him know the truth." He jumped up, looming over the table. "We've put up with you for 4 years. You live in our house, eat our food." Which I cook myself and partially pay for, I remarked, maintaining outward calm, though my heart was pounding. And you dare to make demands? Parker was almost shouting now. You're the worst father living off us. Bridget gasped, and Odelia froze. A heavy silence hung in the room, broken only by Parker's heavy breathing. I slowly stood up, looking my son straight in the eye. I'll make sure I disappear from your life today, I said quietly but firmly. Parker snorted, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. He exchanged glances with Odelia, and they both smirked. Sure, Dad, he said condescendingly. Where are you going to go? Sleep on a park bench? Didn't you just say I'm a danger to myself? I asked with a bitter smile. Make up your mind, son. Odelia laughed, covering her mouth with her hand. Cedric, let's all calm down, she said conciliatorily. We can discuss the details later. Right now, let's just have dinner as a family. As a family. Those last two words sounded like the final nail in the coffin to me. Family. What did they know about family? Bridget, I turned to my granddaughter, whose eyes were glistening with unshed tears. I love you, baby. Don't forget that. Grandpa. She started to get up, but Parker put his hand on her shoulder, holding her in place. I nodded as if making a decision and left the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Odelia whisper, He's just upset. He'll calm down tomorrow. Parker replied, Let him get some fresh air. Where's he going to go? In my room, I took my time. I took an old suitcase out of the closet, one I had brought from Miriam's in my house. I carefully packed several sets of clothes, toiletries, and photo albums that I had collected over the years. I took a framed photo off the shelf, me, Miriam, and little Parker on the beach. It was easy for all of us to smile back then. I ran my finger over Miriam's face, then over my little son's face. Where had that happy boy gone? When had he turned into this cold, calculating man? I wrapped the photo in a sweater and put it in my suitcase. Then I took my account book in the folder with the documents I hadn't given to Price from under the mattress. All of that went into the suitcase too. I looked around to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. Books, clothes, trinkets. All of these things could be replaced. The most valuable things were already with me. I left a short note on the table. Parker and Odelia, I'm going away for a couple of days to clear my head, as you advised. Don't worry about me. Cedric. I looked at my watch. It was almost 9 in the evening. I could hear sounds coming from the kitchen. They were continuing dinner without me. I heard Bridget's voice arguing with her parents, then Parker's voice, sharp and irritated. Go to your room. A minute later, the door slammed and the house fell silent. I waited another 10 minutes, then picked up my suitcase and phone. I quietly left through the separate entrance of the annex and headed for the street. On the driveway, I turned around one last time. The house in which I had invested so much money and hope glowed with warm lights. But there was no longer a place for me there. I called a taxi using the app that Bridget had installed for me a month ago. Grandpa, this way you can go wherever you want, even when we're busy, she said at the time. She was a smart girl, intuitively understanding that her parents wouldn't drive me around on my errands. The taxi arrived in 7 minutes. I gave the driver Emmett's address, and the car pulled away. Looking out the window at Lexington Street rushing by, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the weight that had been pressing on my shoulders for the past few years was beginning to lift. My phone vibrated. A message from Bridget. Grandpa, are you okay? Mom and Dad say you're just being dramatic. I'm worried. I smiled a sad smile and replied, I'm fine, sweetheart. I need some time. I'll call you tomorrow. I love you. She replied immediately, I love you too. Promise you'll call? I promise, I typed and turned off my phone. Emmett's house was located in a prestigious neighborhood of Lexington, a large modern mansion with a well-kept garden and lighting. When the taxi stopped at the gate, I saw the front door open and Emmett appear on the threshold. Finally, he exclaimed, coming down the steps to help me with my suitcase. I thought you'd never make up your mind. Were you waiting for me? I asked in surprise, paying the taxi driver. Of course, Emmett slapped me on the shoulder. I've known you for half a century, Cedric. You're not the type to put up with humiliation forever. Sooner or later, you would have said, enough is enough. We entered the house. In the spacious foyer, we were greeted by Phoebe, Emmett's third wife. A slender woman in her 50s with short blonde hair and a friendly smile. "Cedric," she hugged me. "I'm so glad you came. Emmett told me everything. The guest room is ready, and I've put out fresh linens." "Thank you, Phoebe." I was touched by their concern. "I didn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Emmett waved it off. "Stay here as long as you need, even forever." "I'll find a place to live as soon as possible," I promised. "I have the means." "Don't rush," Emmett led me deeper into the house. "You need time to think things through. Besides, Price and I need to finish preparing the documents." In the guest room, bright and spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a separate bathroom, I put down my suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. Only now did I feel how tired I was. Not physically, emotionally. Years of pent-up resentment, disappointment, and feelings of betrayal came crashing down on me all at once. "Hey," Emmett sat down next to me. "How are you?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just walked away from my own son. I practically ran away." "You didn't run away," Emmett said firmly. "You made a strategic retreat, so you can come back stronger." I nodded, not entirely sure that was true. But one thing I knew for sure, there was no turning back. The bridges were burned, and somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of sadness and exhaustion, I felt a tiny spark of freedom. "What now?" I asked, looking at my old friend. "Now you're going to rest," Emmett said, getting up and heading for the door. "And tomorrow we'll start a new chapter in your life. A chapter where you'll finally stop being a doormat." He paused in the doorway. "And Cedric, Miriam would be proud of you today." When the door closed, I lay down on the bed without undressing. The phone I turned on to answer Bridget showed 3 missed calls from Parker and one message. "Dad, stop messing around. Where are you?" I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. Tomorrow a new life would begin, but today I just disappeared. I spent the first 3 days at Emmett's house in a strange stupor. I was surrounded by comfort and care, but it all seemed unreal, as if I were watching what was happening from the outside. Parker called every day, at first irritably, then with a note of concern in his voice. I didn't answer, but I listened to his messages. "Dad, this isn't funny anymore. Bridget is worried." "Cedric, this is Odilia. Parker is very upset. Please call us." "Dad, where are you? If you're not back by tomorrow, we're going to the police." On the 4th day, I finally responded, but only to Bridget's message. "Grandpa, please tell me you're okay. Mom and Dad are going crazy, and I'm afraid you're somewhere alone and not doing well." I wrote her a short message. "Sweetheart, I'm fine. I'm safe staying with a friend. I need some time. Don't worry about me." She replied instantly, "Can I come to you? I miss you so much." That simple question threw me off balance more than all the previous events. I sat in Emmett's guest room, staring at my phone screen, and felt tears welling up in my eyes. My granddaughter, the only person in that family who truly loved me. "Soon, sweetheart. Now is not the time. I'll call you over the weekend, I promise." After that, I turned off my phone again and went down to Emmett's office, where Hugh Price was waiting for me. The lawyer had arrived as soon as I told him what had happened. "So, Mr. Hall," Price spread the documents on the table, "I've prepared a draft of the lawsuit. We need to clarify a few details." We spent the next 2 hours discussing strategy. Price suggested starting with a formal letter offering an amicable settlement. "This often helps avoid a trial," he explained. "People agree to compromise when they realize the alternative is a public hearing." "My son is not the type to easily admit his mistakes." I shook my head. "He inherited his stubbornness from his mother." "Nevertheless, it's standard procedure," Price insisted. "Besides, if it goes to court, it will show our good faith, that we tried to resolve the conflict peacefully." I agreed, even though deep down I knew Parker would see the letter as a declaration of war rather than an attempt at reconciliation. Emmett, who had been sitting in the corner of the office during our conversation, interjected. "Hugh, tell him about the odds. Don't sugarcoat it." Price folded his arms on the table and looked me straight in the eye. "Mr. Hall, I won't lie to you. This is not an easy case. Without a written agreement, we will have to prove the existence of a verbal agreement, which is always difficult. However," he raised his finger, "we have 3 strong arguments. First, your impeccable financial records confirming the size and purpose of the investments. Second, witness testimony, including Mr. Pryor, who was aware of the agreement from the beginning, and third, your continuous residence in the house and participation in its maintenance for 4 years, which confirms the existence of the agreement. He paused, giving me time to digest what he had said. If the judge is objective, we have a good chance. I would estimate it at 70%. And if he isn't? I asked. Price shrugged slightly. In that case, everything may depend on how convincingly your son and his wife present their version of events. I nodded, understanding the risks. When will we send the letter? Tomorrow morning by courier, Price replied. That will give them time to think about it before the weekend. If we don't receive a response by Monday, we'll file the lawsuit on Tuesday. The next day, Friday, the official letter was delivered to Parker and Odelia. I could imagine their reaction. First bewilderment, then shock, turning to rage. My phone started ringing almost immediately after the estimated delivery time. But I didn't answer. Instead, I went with Emmett to look at apartments. My friend insisted on this, arguing that I needed to think about the future and not dwell on the conflict. Look, he said, showing me a modern studio apartment in a new building not far from the center. It's 10 minutes from the park, close to cafes and a library. Perfect for you. The apartment was nice, bright, with panoramic windows and a small balcony. I could imagine myself here, reading a book in an armchair by the window, having tea with Bridget. How much? I asked the realtor, an elderly woman with kind eyes. $230,000, she replied, but the owner is willing to discuss the price. I exchanged glances with Emmett. It was within my means, even with a reserve for furnishings and unexpected expenses. I'll think about it, I said, feeling strangely excited. My own place, independence, a new life. When we returned to Emmett's that evening, a surprise awaited me. Standing on the doorstep was a teenager with a bicycle, a courier from a local delivery service. Mr. Hall, he asked, checking the notes on his phone. I have a package for you. It was an envelope sealed and with no return address. Inside was a letter written in Bridget's familiar handwriting. Grandpa, I don't know what's going on between you and Dad, but today some man came to our house with some papers, and after that, Dad yelled so loud that the neighbors almost called the police. He said terrible things about you, and Mom cried. Then they went somewhere, and when they came back, Dad was a little calmer, but still angry. I overheard their conversation. I know it's not right, but I was worried. Dad said you're trying to take our house away from us. Is that true? Please explain to me what's going on. P.S. I found your address in Mom's phone when she wasn't looking. Don't tell them I wrote to you. Love you, your Bridget. I reread the letter several times, then sat down in a chair, feeling my hands shake. Emmett waited silently, then asked, Bad news? I handed him the letter. From my granddaughter, I said. She's a smart girl. Too smart for her age. Emmett read the note and whistled. They were quick to get a lawyer. I wonder who advised them. I turned on my phone to text Bridget. The screen showed 27 missed calls and dozens of messages. From Parker, Odelia, even from several mutual acquaintances whom my son had apparently told his version of events. The first message from Parker, sent at noon. What the hell is that letter? Are you crazy? Call me immediately. The second, an hour later. This isn't funny, Dad. You can't just come and take our house. And the last one in the evening. Our lawyer says you don't stand a chance. But if you think this won't destroy our family for good, you're wrong. I ignored all the messages and wrote only to Bridget. Honey, don't worry. Adults sometimes argue, but that doesn't mean they stop loving each other or you. Your dad and I do have a dispute over the house, but it won't affect you in any way. I'll always be there for you, even if I don't live with you. Thank you for your letter. Shall we meet tomorrow after school? I'll wait for you at the Morning Star Cafe at 4. Don't tell anyone about the meeting. Love you, Grandpa. After sending the message, I turned off my phone and looked at Emmett. I'm meeting Bridget tomorrow. She should hear the truth from me, not Parker's distorted version. Emmett nodded without arguing, though I could see the concern in his eyes. Be careful. Parker could use this against you if he finds out. The next day, I sat in the cozy Morning Star Cafe, nervously glancing at my watch. It was 5 minutes to 4. Bridget wasn't late. She was always punctual, just like me. At exactly 4 o'clock, she entered the cafe, tall, slender, with a red ponytail, wearing a school uniform and carrying a backpack. When she saw me, she rushed across the room and hugged me tightly, burying her face in my chest. "Grandpa," she whispered, and I heard tears in her voice. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, sweetheart." I stroked her hair, feeling my own heart tighten with tenderness. "Come on, let's sit down. I ordered you some hot chocolate." We settled in a far corner of the cafe, where acquaintances were unlikely to spot us. Bridget got straight to the point. "What's going on? Dad says you want to take our house away from us." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Not exactly. I want to get my share of the house, which I deserve." "What share?" She frowned. "When Grandma died, I sold our old house," I began slowly. "I gave most of the money, almost $250,000, to your dad and mom to buy the house where you now live. We agreed that I would live with you and that the house would be partly mine." "And what happened?" "Your parents decided they no longer needed to honor that agreement. They wanted to send me to a nursing home and turn my room into a gym." Bridget's eyes widened. "They didn't tell me about the gym." "Only about the nursing home, but they said you'd be better off there." "What do you think?" I asked gently. "Is it better for me to be alone among strangers or to be with you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "With me, of course. I don't want you to leave, Grandpa." I took her hand. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults make decisions that they think are right, even if they hurt others. Your parents think they're doing the right thing." "But it's not fair," she exclaimed. "Yes, I agreed. That's why I went to a lawyer, to restore justice." Bridget thought about it, stirring her hot chocolate with a spoon. "What will happen now?" "If your parents agree to a compromise, we'll settle everything peacefully. If not, the judge will decide who is right." "What will happen to me?" Fear sounded in her voice. "Won't I be able to see you?" "Nonsense," I squeezed her hand. "We'll always see each other. I'm looking for an apartment not far from here. You'll have your own room, and you can come visit whenever you want." That seemed to calm her down a little. We spent another hour talking about school, her friends, everything except the conflict with her parents. When it was time to say goodbye, she hugged me tightly. "Mom and Dad don't know I'm here," she whispered. "I told them I was going to Ellie's to study for a test." "Be careful," I said. "And remember, no matter what happens between me and your parents, I love you, and that will never change." She nodded, adjusted her backpack, and walked out of the cafe, turning back at the door with a sad smile. On Monday morning, Hugh Price called me. "Mr. Hall, we're expected at their law office at 2 o'clock. They want to discuss a settlement." I was surprised. Parker wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. "Are you sure this isn't a trap?" "Your son's lawyer is Martin Blake. I know him personally," Price replied. "He wouldn't play games like that. If he set up the meeting, it means your son is ready to negotiate." At the appointed time, Price and I entered a small office in downtown Lexington. Parker, Odelia, and their lawyer, a short, middle-aged man with a sharp gaze and a neat beard, were already waiting for us in the conference room. Parker barely glanced at me when we entered. His face was stony. Odelia looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but she also maintained a cold expression. "Gentlemen, ladies," Blake began the meeting, "let's try to have this conversation constructively and without emotion." Price nodded as he took out the documents. "We have received your request for a meeting. I assume you are ready to discuss our proposal?" Blake glanced at Parker, who nodded slightly. "We have carefully reviewed Mr. Hall's letter and the attached documents," the lawyer began. "And although my clients find it difficult to agree with the interpretation of events, they are willing to discuss certain compensation in exchange for dropping the lawsuit." "Compensation," Price repeated with a slight smile. "Interesting wording. We are not talking about compensation, but about Mr. Hall's legal right to a share in the property that he actually helped to acquire." Blake frowned slightly. "That's your interpretation. We have reason to believe that the court may consider these funds to be a gift." "Based on what?" Price asked. "We have documentary evidence of the investment, witness testimony about the agreement, confirmation of Mr. Hall's permanent residence in the house, and his contribution to the maintenance costs. What do you have besides your client's words?" Blake paused, then sighed. "Mr. Price, let's be honest. The trial will be long, expensive, and painful for all parties, especially for Mr. Hall's underage granddaughter. Are you sure you want to put a child through that kind of stress? I tensed at the mention of Bridget. They were using my love for my granddaughter as leverage. My granddaughter is already suffering, I said, unable to hold back, because of her parents' decision to kick me out of the house I helped buy. Dad, Parker spoke for the first time, his voice tense. You're exaggerating. We offered you comfortable accommodation in a good facility. To make room for a gym, I finished for him. Odelia flushed. It was just a suggestion. We hadn't even started planning anything. Gentlemen, Price raised his hand, let's get back to the point. My client demands recognition of his share in the property, corresponding to his financial contribution. That's about 50% of the market value of the house at the time of purchase. Taking into account the increase in real estate prices over 4 years, that's approximately $300,000. Parker's cheek twitched. That's absurd. Where are we going to get that kind of money? We can sell the house, Price replied calmly, or take out a mortgage against your share. Sell our house? Odelia looked as if she had been struck. It's our house. And my client's, Price added. Or more accurately, it was his house until you decided to get rid of it. Blake raised his hand, urging everyone to calm down. Let's take a break. I need to talk to my clients in private. Price and I stepped out into the hallway. As soon as the door closed, I turned to the lawyer. They're playing on my feelings for Bridget. Of course, Price nodded. That's to be expected. But don't let them manipulate you. They're backed into a corner and looking for any way out. 15 minutes later, we were invited back in. Parker looked depressed, and Odelia looked angry. Blake folded his arms on the table. My clients are willing to discuss compensation of $150,000 over 2 years. That's their maximum offer. Price looked at me questioningly. I shook my head. $300,000 in a lump sum, I said firmly, or the sale of the house and a division of the proceeds. Dad, Parker looked at me with fury. Are you really willing to throw us out on the street? Your own family? You were the first to decide to throw me out on the street, son, I replied, or more accurately, into a nursing home. We can offer $180,000, Blake interjected. That's really the maximum my clients can afford without selling the house. Price looked at me again. I thought about it. $180,000 plus what I already have. That would be enough for an apartment and a comfortable life. But it wasn't just about the money. $200,000, I said finally, and a public apology from Parker and Odelia for trying to send me to a nursing home against my will. What? Parker jumped up. You want us to apologize for taking care of you? Parker, Blake put his hand on his shoulder, forcing him to sit down. Let's not get heated. He turned to me. Mr. Hall, my clients may agree to $200,000, but a public apology, that's excessive. Then we'll settle this in court, I stood up. Price, we're leaving. Wait, Odelia exclaimed. We'll accept $200,000, and we'll apologize, but not publicly, only within the family. I gave her a long look. She had always been practical, unlike Parker with his pride. Okay, I finally agreed. $200,000 within 30 days and an apology in front of Bridget and Emmett Pryor. And I want it all in writing. Blake nodded, looking relieved. We'll have the agreement ready in the next few days. When we stepped outside, Price shook my hand. Congratulations, Mr. Hall. It's a good deal. I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness inside. I had won. But at what cost? Parker's face, contorted with rage, was before my eyes. My son, my only child, now probably lost to me forever. Mr. Hall, Price's voice brought me back to reality. You did what you had to do. They left you with a choice, either a humiliating existence on their terms or a fight for your dignity. You chose dignity, and I'm sure your late wife would have approved of your choice. I smiled a sad smile. Thank you, Mr. Price. You're right. Miriam always said our son should respect his elders. It's a pity he didn't learn that lesson. On the way to Emmett's house, I turned on my phone and saw a message from Bridget. Grandpa, Mom and Dad came back from some meeting. Dad was yelling that you were blackmailing him, and Mom was crying in the bathroom. What's going on? Please reply. I sighed and wrote, We've reached a compromise, sweetheart. Everything will settle down soon. Don't worry, you will always be a part of my life. no matter what happens between me and your parents. A minute later, the reply came. Do you swear? I swear, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. Emmett was waiting for me at home with a bottle of champagne. Tell me everything, he demanded as soon as I crossed the threshold. I told him about the meeting, the agreement we had reached, and Parker and Odelia's faces. 200,000, Emmett whistled, plus what you already have from your investments. You're a wealthy man now, Cedric. Money can't compensate for the loss of a son, I sighed. Emmett shook his head. You didn't lose your son, Cedric. You lost him long before that, when he stopped seeing you as a father and started seeing you as a burden. Today you just stopped pretending that everything was fine. I nodded, knowing he was right, and yet deep down, I still hoped that one day perhaps Parker would understand what had happened, and maybe he would find the strength to apologize sincerely, not out of coercion, but from the heart. But until that day came, I had a new life to build, and a granddaughter to protect from the consequences of adult conflicts. 3 weeks passed, but the promised apology never came. Parker avoided meetings, citing his busy schedule, and when Price pressed him, citing the terms of the agreement, my son made a new demand. The meeting had to take place without Emmett, just the family. He's bargaining like he's at the market, Emmett said indignantly when I told him about it. And you still doubt the correctness of your decision? I just sighed. Something told me that Parker was not looking for a compromise, but a way to humiliate me, to make me feel like a traitor to my family. Without a witness, it would have been easier to do. During that time, I managed to buy the apartment that Emmett and I had been looking at. It was a bright, spacious one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a modern building with an elevator and a concierge. I had already moved some of my things there and was slowly settling in, although I was still technically living with Emmett. On Wednesday morning, Price called me. Mr. Hall, we have a problem. His usually confident voice sounded concerned. Blake has informed us that his clients are refusing to comply with the terms of the agreement. What? I sat up, feeling my heart skip a beat. But we agreed on everything. Formally, the agreement has not yet been signed, Price said. Blake was dragging his feet on preparing the documents, and now I understand why. They decided to take a chance and go to court. I pressed my fingers to my bridge of my nose, trying to cope with my disappointment. Of course, Parker couldn't just give up. His pride wouldn't allow it. What now? Now we file a lawsuit as we originally planned, Price replied firmly. I've already prepared all the documents. If you agree, I'll file them with the court tomorrow morning. I agreed. I didn't really have a choice, and something inside me just clicked. If Parker wanted a fight, he was going to get one. The hearing was set for October 3rd, 2 weeks later. The court seemed to be in a hurry to resolve the case, which was unusual for civil lawsuits, which usually drag on for months. We're lucky with the judge, Price explained as we prepared for the hearing. Judge Eleanor Hammond is known for her intolerance of family conflicts and her tendency to resolve them quickly and decisively. Is that good for us? I asked. Price shrugged. It depends on how she perceives our story. Hammond usually sides with whoever she considers more vulnerable. In your case, that could be an advantage. The day of the trial came unexpectedly quickly. I put on my best suit, the one I had once worn to marry Parker to Odelia. The suit was a little loose. I had lost weight in recent weeks, the stress affecting my appetite. Emmett insisted on driving me to court himself. Cedric, remember, he said as we drove, whatever happens, you did the right thing. You're defending your dignity. Miriam would be proud of you. I nodded, but my thoughts were far away. I remembered little Parker, who once looked up to me with adoration, as if I were a hero. When did everything change? Maybe I wasn't a very good father. Maybe I didn't support him enough, didn't praise him enough. Stop it, Emmett said, as if he could read my mind. I've known you for almost 50 years. You were a great father. Parker chose his own path. Price was already waiting for us in the courthouse. He was composed and exuded confidence. Everything is ready, he said. I've reviewed the defense's materials. They are trying to present your contribution as a gift, citing parental responsibility to help children. It's a pretty weak position, especially considering your financial records. In front of the courtroom, I saw Parker and Odelia. They were standing next to Blake, talking quietly about something. Parker noticed me first. His gaze turned cold, his lips pressed into a thin line. Odelia also looked at me, but quickly looked away. The hearing began at 10 o'clock sharp. Judge Hammond, an elderly woman with a sharp gaze and pursed lips, got straight to the point. "So, we have a family dispute over property rights," she said, looking through the documents. "Mr. Hall Sr. claims that he invested significant funds in his son's house with a verbal agreement to live together. Mr. Hall Jr. and his wife claim that these funds were a gift. Am I understanding the essence of the case correctly?" "Yes, Your Honor," Price and Blake replied simultaneously. "Good," the judge nodded. "I have reviewed the documents provided, but I would like to hear from the parties personally. Let's start with the plaintiff. Mr. Hall Sr., tell us how it all happened." I stood up, feeling my mouth go dry. The words Price and I had rehearsed suddenly flew out of my head. "Your Honor," I began, clearing my throat. "When my wife, Miriam, died 4 years ago, I sold the house we had lived in for 35 years. My son offered to let me move in with them, saying they would expand the addition and give me a separate entrance. I described our agreement in detail, how I transferred the money, how I regularly paid for utilities and participated in home repairs. We didn't have any written agreements," I admitted. "I trusted my son. He said, 'Don't worry about the paperwork, Dad. We're family. This house will be your home for the rest of your days.'" I spoke calmly, trying to stick to the facts, but when I got to the part about the nursing home and the gym, my voice began to tremble. "They decided to get rid of me, Your Honor. My son yelled that I was the worst father, living off them. All I wanted was to spend my old age in the house I helped buy, close to the granddaughter I love." The judge listened attentively, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, she nodded and turned to Parker. "Mr. Hall Jr., it's your turn." Parker stood up and adjusted his tie. He looked confident, almost smug. "Your Honor, of course I suggested that my father move in with us after my mother died. He was alone, and the house was too big for him. Yes, he helped us with the down payment, and we are grateful for that. But it was a gift, not an investment." He spoke convincingly, describing how he cared for me, how he remodeled the annex, how patient he was with my senile quirks. "Lately, Dad has become forgetful, sometimes even dangerous to himself," Parker continued. "My wife and I wanted to provide him with professional care in a good facility, but he took it as a betrayal and is now trying to take our house away, to deprive his own granddaughter of a roof over her head." I clenched my fists under the table. What a skilled manipulator my son had become. After the parties had presented their cases, the examination of witnesses began. Price called Emmett, who confirmed that I had always talked about investing in my son's house as a way to secure my place in the family in my old age, not as a gift. Then Blake called Parker's neighbor, an elderly woman named Lorraine, who recounted how I once forgot to turn off the garden hose, and water ran all night, flooding her flower beds. The story was true, but it was a one-time occurrence. It happened only once, on a day when my back was hurting badly and I took a painkiller that made me drowsy. Price presented my financial records, a neat ledger book where every dollar invested in my son's house was recorded. Blake tried to challenge these records, calling them one-sided and biased, but Judge Hammond was clearly impressed by their thoroughness. "Mr. Hall Sr., she asked, "have you always kept such detailed records of your expenses?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "I was an accountant for 42 years. It's a professional habit." She nodded as if noting something for herself. The hearing lasted nearly 4 hours. By the end, I felt squeezed like a lemon. The judge announced a recess to consider her decision. "I'm giving myself an hour to think," she said. "Everyone please remain in the courthouse." Price, Emmett, and I settled in the hallway, while Parker and Odelia went to the opposite end, avoiding any contact. "What do you think our chances are?" I asked Price. "Hard to say," he shrugged. "Your financial records made an impression, that's for sure, and Emmett's testimony was convincing. But without a written agreement, it all depends on who the judge believes more." The hour dragged on endlessly. I watched Parker from a distance. He looked tense, constantly checking his phone, nervously talking to Odelia and Blake. Finally, we were invited back into the courtroom. Judge Hammond looked determined. "Having considered all the evidence presented and heard the testimony of the parties, I am ready to render my decision," she began. "This is a difficult case, as are most family disputes. On the one hand, we have no written agreement on joint ownership. On the other hand, There is compelling evidence of Mr. Hall Sr.'s significant financial contribution to the purchase of the property. She paused, shifting her gaze from me to Parker. In cases like this, the court is guided by the principle of fairness. And here I see a clear injustice to the plaintiff. The man invested most of his savings in his son's house, hoping to enjoy a secure retirement surrounded by his family. Instead, they are trying to evict him and send him to a nursing home so they can use his living space for a gym. Odelia bowed her head low. Parker sat up straight, but I could see his knuckles turn white as he gripped the edge of the table. The court rules that the plaintiff, Cedric Hall, is entitled to a share of the disputed property commensurate with his financial contribution, namely 45% of the market value of the house at the time of the hearing. The defendants, Parker and Odelia Hall, have the choice of either paying the plaintiff $285,000 within 60 days or putting the property up for sale and dividing the proceeds in the specified proportion. Silence hung in the courtroom. I couldn't believe my ears. We had won, even more than we had hoped for. In addition, the judge continued, the defendants are required to pay the plaintiff's legal costs in full. The hearing is adjourned. She banged her gavel, and the courtroom came to life. Price shook my hand, and Emmett patted me on the shoulder. I looked at Parker, his face pale, and at Odelia, who was crying silently, her face hidden in her hands. What now? I asked Price as we left the courtroom. Now we wait for their decision, whether they will pay or sell the house, he replied. But given their reaction, I doubt they have nearly $300,000. I nodded. Building inspector and logistics coordinator are good professions, but not ones that provide instant access to such sums. As we left the courthouse, Blake caught up with us. Mr. Hall, he said to me, my clients would like to discuss the possibility of an installment plan. Price shook his head. The court's decision was clear. 60 days. No installment plans. But it's their house. Blake looked genuinely emotional for the first time. Do you really want to throw your family out on the street? I just wanted justice, I replied, and the court provided it. That same evening, Bridget called me. She was crying. Grandpa, what's going on? Mom and Dad came back from court, and Dad was yelling that you took our house away from us. Is that true? No, sweetheart, I sighed, feeling my heart break at her tears. I didn't take the house. I just demanded my share of it. The court ruled that I have a right to it. But Dad says we'll have to sell it now. Where will we go? Bridget, listen. I tried to speak calmly, even though inside I was boiling with anger at Parker for using his own daughter as a weapon. The money I'll get from the sale belonged to me in the first place. I'm not taking your house away, but your parents didn't want to let me live in the house I helped buy. I don't understand, she sobbed. Why can't adults just get along? Sometimes they can't. I closed my eyes, feeling powerless in the face of her grief. But I promise I'll always be there for you, no matter what happens. I have my own apartment now, and there's a room for you in it. You can come anytime. Dad won't let me, she whispered. He said you're not part of the family anymore. Those words hit me harder than I expected. Not part of the family, after everything I've done for them. Your dad is very upset right now, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Give him time to cool down. In the meantime, you know where I live, right? You can come by after school if you want. I'll come, she promised. Just don't tell Mom and Dad. A week after the trial, Parker put the house up for sale. The news quickly spread throughout their neighborhood. Neighbors, many of whom knew me, began asking questions. Parker and Odelia tried to keep quiet, but rumors spread quickly. One of Parker's colleagues found out about the lawsuit, and soon everyone in his office was talking about how he was trying to evict his elderly father for the sake of a gym. His son's reputation, which had always been impeccable, began to suffer. Odelia faced a similar problem at work. Her boss, an older woman, openly expressed her disapproval of how they had treated me. You'd think that marrying a caring boy like Parker would teach you to respect your elders, she said to Odelia in front of her colleagues. The story reached me through mutual acquaintances. The house was sold for $610,000, a little less than Parker had hoped, but the Lexington real estate market was not doing well. My share was $274,500. Another $10,500 covered legal costs. Parker and Odelia bought a smaller house in a less prestigious neighborhood. Bridget had to change schools, which was a heavy blow for her. She left her friends and familiar surroundings. Another reason to resent the grandpa who ruined everything. But to my surprise, it was Bridget who was the first to find the strength to overcome her resentment. A month after they moved, she showed up at the door of my new apartment unannounced with a backpack on her shoulders. Bridget! I was so happy to see her that I almost cried. How did you find me? Emmett told me, she smiled sheepishly. I called his office and said I wanted to see you. He gave me the address and said you'd be happy to see me. He's right, I hugged her. I'm very happy. Do your parents know you're here? She shook her head. I told them I was going to the library to study for an exam. They're still, well, you know. I nodded. Of course they were still angry. That was to be expected. Come in, I led her into the apartment. Would you like to see your room? Her eyes widened. I really have a room? Of course, I smiled. I promised. I showed her the small but cozy room I had set up especially for her, with a desk, bookshelves, and a comfortable bed. Is this all for me? She looked around the room, clearly touched. It's all for you, sweetheart. You can come whenever you want. Stay for the weekend, for the holidays. This is your home, too. She hugged me tightly, burying her face in my shoulder. I missed you, Grandpa. Home is so tense. Dad is constantly nervous. Mom cries at night. They think I can't hear them, but the walls in the new house are thin. I'm sorry it turned out this way, I said sincerely. I never wanted to hurt you or your parents. I know, she pulled away and looked me in the eyes. I understand that, and I want you to know that no matter what Dad and Mom say, I will always love you. You will always be my family. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. At that moment, despite all the losses and pain of the past few months, I felt that it had not been in vain. My granddaughter stood before me, looking at me with a love and understanding that I had not seen in my son's eyes for many years. You can come here anytime, I repeated, squeezing her hand tightly. Even if your parents are against it, this door will always be open to you. She nodded, smiling through her tears, and I realized that whatever the cost of my fight for justice, it was worth it. For this moment, for this connection, for the opportunity to remain a grandfather to Bridget, despite all the disagreements with her parents. The winter in Lexington was surprisingly mild. The window of my new apartment overlooked a park where, even in December, patches of green grass remained among the patches of snow. In the mornings, I watched elderly couples walking their dogs, young mothers pushing strollers, children playing in the playground. Life went on as usual, and now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of it, not an outside observer. My apartment became a real home. One bedroom for me, the second for Bridget, a cozy living room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a compact kitchen where I experimented with new recipes. On the balcony, I set up a mini garden, containers with greenery that was pleasing to the eye even in winter. It was my space, my fortress, where no one could tell me I was a burden or that I had forgotten to turn off the stove. Bridget came every Friday after school and stayed for the weekend. At first, Parker and Odelia were against it, but then they apparently decided that it gave them a chance to relax a little. Besides, Bridget was stubborn. She took after me in that respect, as Miriam used to say. Once, when Parker forbade her to come to my place, she simply didn't come home from school and came straight to me, and we had to call her parents so they wouldn't worry. After that incident, they tacitly accepted our meetings. Grandpa, can I invite Ellie over on Saturday? Bridget asked one Friday evening as we were making dinner. We could do math together. She's having trouble with algebra. Of course, sweetheart, I smiled, cutting vegetables for the salad. Your friends are always welcome here. She beamed, then added hesitantly, only, Ellie lives near our old house. Maybe you could pick us up. Dad won't let me take the car, and the bus takes too long. I froze, the knife suspended over the tomato. The old house, the neighborhood where strangers now lived, the neighborhood where I might run into Parker or Odelia. Of course, I said, trying to hide my excitement. Write down Ellie's address, and I'll come pick you up. On Saturday afternoon, I parked near the house that Bridget had indicated in her message. It was a large two-story mansion, very similar to the one where my family used to live. The girls were already waiting on the porch. Bridget and her friend, a petite brunette with lively eyes. They climbed into the back seat, chatting animatedly. I turned onto the main road, trying not to look at the old house, but I couldn't help myself and glanced briefly as we drove past. The new owners had already changed the color of the front door from blue to red and installed a swing set in the front yard. It was strange to see the place I had invested so much hope in so quickly become someone else's home. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Bridget's voice brought me back to reality. "Yes, sweetie, just thinking." I smiled at her in the rearview mirror. The evening with the girls was fun. I helped them with their algebra, then we made pizza and watched a comedy. When Ellie left, her father picked her up. Bridget suddenly became serious. "Grandpa, I wanted to tell you something." She sat down next to me on the sofa. "Mom and Dad, they fight all the time." I sighed, expecting something like this. 3 months had passed since the trial and the move, but the wounds inflicted by this conflict had hardly had time to heal. "What are they arguing about?" I asked cautiously. "Everything," she shrugged. "Money, the new house. Who's to blame?" "Dad says that if Mom hadn't insisted on the gym, none of this would have happened. Mom says that if he earned more, we could pay you your share and keep the house." I closed my eyes for a moment. Just like when I was a child, when my parents were divorcing, each blamed the other, and neither wanted to admit their responsibility. "I'm sorry you have to listen to this," I said, hugging my granddaughter around the shoulders. "I think they might get divorced," she whispered, and I heard the fear in her voice. "Bridget, listen." I turned her to face me. "Whatever happens between your parents, they both love you more than anything in the world. And so do I. You will always be surrounded by love, even if things change." She nodded, but I could see that my words didn't comfort her much. At 16, it's hard to accept that the world can fall apart and be rebuilt. The following week, Emmett called me. "Cedric, I have news." His voice sounded unusually serious. "I just heard from John Peterson. Remember him? He works for the same company as your son." "What happened?" I tensed up. "Parker has handed in his resignation. John says he found a job in Cincinnati, Ohio. They're moving." I sank into my chair, feeling my heart skip a beat. Cincinnati. That's in another state, 3 hours away from Lexington. They're taking Bridget, taking her away from me. "Are you sure?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Yes, John overheard Parker discussing it with his boss. The salary is higher, the cost of living is lower, and, as Parker said, away from toxic relationships." I thanked Emmett for the information and hung up. Of course, I understood my son's decision. Lexington had become a city of defeat and humiliation for him. Colleagues and neighbors knew about our story, and some openly condemned him. A new job, a new city, a chance to start with a clean slate. But what about Bridget? What about our Friday dinners, our weekends, her room, which I had so carefully furnished? I didn't have time to finish these thoughts before the phone rang again. Bridget's name lit up on the screen. My hands trembled as I answered the call. "Grandpa." Her voice sounded muffled, as if she were speaking from under a blanket. "Do you know yet?" "About Cincinnati?" I asked quietly. "I just found out." "I don't want to go." Her voice sounded desperate. "I don't want to leave you, my friends, my school." "Sweetheart," I tried to speak calmly, even though I was boiling inside. "Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions. Your parents think this is best for everyone." "No," she almost shouted. "It's best for them. They don't care how I feel. I'm not going, Grandpa. I'm staying with you." I closed my eyes, feeling my heart break. More than anything in the world, I wanted to say yes, to tell her she could stay with me, that we would find a way, that I would fight for her like I had fought for my share of the house. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't drag her back into the conflict between adults. Couldn't make her choose between her parents and me. "Bridget, listen to me," I said softly but firmly. "Cincinnati isn't that far away. 3 hours by car. I'll come to see you. You'll come to see me on vacation. We'll talk on the phone every day. Nothing will change." "Everything will change," she sobbed. "Dad hates you. He won't let me see you." "Your dad doesn't hate me," I lied. "He's just very hurt and upset right now. It will pass with time. In the meantime, we'll find a way to stay close, even if we're far apart." There was silence on the line, broken only by her quiet sobs. "Do you promise?" she finally asked. "Do you promise we won't lose each other?" "I promise," I said. And at that moment, I vowed to myself that I would keep that promise, no matter what it took. They left a month later. Parker didn't call me, didn't say goodbye. We hadn't seen each other since that day in court. Odelia sent a short message with Bridget's new address, and I was grateful to her for this small gesture of reconciliation. The first few weeks without my granddaughter were difficult. The apartment felt empty and quiet, especially on Fridays, when I was used to hearing her laughter, discussing school with her, and cooking her favorite meals. We talked on the phone every evening, and I sent her a new phone with an unlimited plan so that Parker couldn't control our communication through the bills. She told me about her new school, new friends, and new home. I could see that she was trying to be strong, but sometimes her voice trembled, and I knew that it was as hard for her as it was for me. 2 months after they moved in mid-February, I decided to visit Bridget. I warned her in advance, but I didn't call Parker or Odelia. I knew they might forbid it. Cincinnati greeted me with wet snow and a chilly wind. The navigator led me to a small but neat house in the suburbs. Standard development, identical houses on identical plots. So unlike their former home in Lexington, spacious, with character, and a well-kept garden. I parked across the street and texted Bridget that I had arrived. A minute later, the front door swung open, and she ran out to meet me without even putting on a jacket. "Grandpa!" She threw herself into my arms, and I held her tight, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "You came." "Of course I did," I smiled. "I promised." We sat in a cafe near her house. Bridget talked about her new school, her new friends, and how much she missed Lexington. "Dad works more now," she said, poking at her ice cream with a spoon. "He comes home late, often irritable. Mom got a job at a transportation company, but they pay less than in Lexington. They still fight a lot." I listened, trying not to show how much it hurt me to hear about their difficulties. I didn't want that. I didn't want their life to fall apart. I only wanted justice and respect. "And yesterday," Bridget lowered her voice, "I heard Mom tell Dad that moving was a mistake, that they should have just taken out a loan and paid you your share. Dad got angry and left the house and didn't come back until morning." I was silent, not knowing what to say. This was not the kind of information a 16-year-old girl should be sharing with her grandfather. These were not the kinds of problems a child should be worrying about. "Bridget," I took her hand, "whatever is going on between your parents, it's not your fault and it's not your responsibility. You don't have to be a mediator or worry about them. They're adults. They'll figure it out." "I know," she sighed. "It's just that sometimes I feel like our family will never be the same again." "It won't," I agreed honestly. "But that doesn't mean there won't be happiness or love. It'll just be different." We spent the whole day together. I took her to the local art museum, we had lunch at a nice restaurant, and just walked around the city, talking about everything under the sun. When it was time to say goodbye, she hugged me tightly. "Come visit again, Grandpa," she whispered. "Promise?" "I promise." I kissed her on the top of her head. "And you come visit me during spring break. I already talked to your mom. She's okay with it." "Really?" Bridget beamed. "Mom said yes." "She did," I smiled. "See, everything's working out." Watching her run toward the house, I felt a strange sense of peace. Yes, much had been lost, but something important had been preserved. My connection with my granddaughter, maybe even the beginning of a thaw in my relationship with Odelia. And although Parker and I would probably never reconcile, I could live with that. I could find peace in what I had, rather than mourn what I had lost. In the spring, life took a new turn. Bridget spent 2 weeks of her vacation with me, and it was a wonderful time. We went to the theater, to parks, cooked together, and just talked for hours. She told me that her parents' relationship had stabilized. It wasn't perfect, but at least they had stopped fighting all the time. "Dad found a gym near work," she said with a hint of irony. "So now he doesn't need a home gym." I smiled, appreciating the irony of the situation. All that tension, all that pain, everything that destroyed our family, because of a gym that turned out not to be so necessary after all. My own life had changed too. I started taking gardening classes at the local community center and met some interesting people my age. I especially enjoyed talking to Eleanor, the widow of a literature professor, an intelligent and refined woman with a gentle smile and attentive eyes. "You have to introduce me to Eleanor," Bridget said one evening when I mentioned our trip to the concert. "Do you think so?" I blushed like a teenager. Of course, she smiled slyly. Grandpa, you deserve to be happy, and I want to meet the woman who makes you smile like that when you talk about her. In June, when Bridget came back for vacation, I introduced them. Eleanor and my granddaughter hit it off right away, talking for hours about books, movies, and, to my embarrassment, me. She's amazing, Bridget said that evening, and she really appreciates you. I smiled, thinking about how strange it all was. A year ago, I was a gloomy old man living in an extension to my ungrateful son's house. Now I had my own apartment, new friends, and maybe even a new relationship. And most importantly, I had regained my self-esteem by finally standing up for my rights. In July, Emmett invited me to a barbecue in honor of his birthday. There were many guests, including Eleanor, with whom I was now openly dating. During the celebration, Emmett took me aside. "So, old friend, do you have any regrets?" he asked, looking at me intently. I thought about it, looking at the gathered guests, at Eleanor, who was enthusiastically discussing something with Emmett's wife, at the summer garden bathed in sunlight. Do I regret losing my relationship with my son? Yes, I replied honestly. Do I regret standing up for my dignity? No, not for a second. Emmett nodded, as if he had expected that answer. You know, he said after a pause, I never told you this, but Miriam made me promise something before she died. What was it? I asked, surprised. She said, look after Cedric. Don't let him lose himself. He's too good for this world, too trusting. And I promised. I felt a lump rising in my throat. Miriam. She was always wiser than me, always saw further. Even as she was leaving, she tried to protect me. Thank you, I squeezed my friend's hand, for everything. In August, Bridget called with unexpected news. Grandpa, Dad said I can come back to Lexington. Her voice rang with excitement. I can live with you and finish school here. What? I couldn't believe my ears. Parker suggested it himself? No, I asked him, she admitted. I told him I missed my old school and my friends, that I wanted to be close to you. I thought he would refuse, but he said that if you agreed, he wouldn't mind. I was stunned. It was unexpected. A small gesture of reconciliation, or simply an admission of defeat, or perhaps an attempt to make his daughter happy, despite his own resentment. Of course I agree, I said, feeling joy fill my heart. Your room is waiting for you. Bridget arrived a week later. Parker brought her himself, the first time we had seen each other face to face in all this time. He was thinner than I remembered, with new wrinkles around his eyes and gray hair at his temples. We exchanged formal greetings and discussed the details. School, expenses, vacations, visits. Neither of us mentioned the past or touched on old wounds. It was a business-like conversation between two people who had once been a family. When Parker left, Bridget hugged him goodbye, and I saw him whisper something in her ear. She nodded, then looked at me with a new expression. What did he say? I asked as we went up to the apartment. He said to take care of you, she replied quietly, and that he's glad I have you. I stopped on the steps, trying to make sense of those words. It wasn't an apology, nor an admission of wrongdoing. Parker wasn't ready for that yet, but it was a small acknowledgement, a small step. In the fall, life took on a new rhythm. Bridget went back to her old school, happy to be reunited with her friends. I resumed my work in the garden, now on the community flower bed near the house. Eleanor became a regular guest at our house, and sometimes we spent the night at her cozy home on the outskirts of Lexington. On Thanksgiving, Bridget flew to her parents' house in Cincinnati. She returned pensive but calm. They're trying, she said when I asked how Parker and Odelia were doing. Dad still works a lot, but they fight less. Mom even asked about you. Really? I was surprised. What did she want to know? She asked if you were happy, Bridget smiled. I said yes. That you have your own home, friends, Eleanor. That you are finally living your own life, not someone else's. I thought about her words. Indeed, for the first time in a long time, I was living my own life, by my own rules, without having to constantly look back at other people's expectations and demands. You know, Grandpa, Bridget put her head on my shoulder, as she used to do when she was a child. Sometimes I think that everything turned out exactly as it should have. If it weren't for that dinner, that argument, maybe you'd still be living in the annex, unhappy and lonely. And now? And now I'm finally living a full life, I finished for her, even if I paid a high price for it. She nodded, and we fell silent, looking out the window at the falling snow, the first of the season. I thought about my journey, about losses and gains, about how sometimes you have to lose something valuable to find yourself. I thought about Miriam, who seemed to have foreseen all this, about her last words. Don't let them take your dignity away. I kept the promise I made to her, and although the journey was difficult, the result was worth it. I was no longer a shadow, no longer a burden, no longer a person for whom others made decisions. I was Cedric Hall, a man who, at 67, found the strength to start a new life. There will probably never be reconciliation with Parker. The wounds are too deep, the resentment too strong. But maybe with time, understanding will come. Maybe someday he will realize that I was not fighting against him, but for myself. For now I have everything I need. A roof over my head that no one can take away from me. A granddaughter who looks at me with love and respect. Friends who support me in difficult times. And a woman with whom I can share the twilight of my life. This is not a perfect fairy tale happy ending. This is life, with all its complexities, compromises, and losses. But this is my life, and I am finally living it on my own terms.